Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dean. My name is Maria Mejia, and I am an environmental law and land use attorney here in Los Angeles, practicing primarily under the California Environmental Quality Act, also known as CEQA. We are going to go over some slides regarding legal research and how it'll help you as an activist. This is an outline of what we are going to cover. So we will go over an introduction as to why legal research will help you, some of the research textbooks, primary sources of the law, secondary sources, which are books about the law, research and strategy, citations and legal hyperlinks, law libraries that you can access physically and online, and our conclusion. Legal research will help you plan in advance. So let's say, for example, a developer wants to develop a 300-unit apartment building next to you, and you believe that project doesn't conform to the character of your community, you will need a basis on which to challenge that project. Another example could be someone wants to construct a freeway through the national forest that is close to you, and you feel that's an improper project for that location. And again, you will need a basis on which to object. Conducting legal research will help you find legal authority that you can apply to the particular facts of your situation. Therefore, you will be able to provide more than mere conclusions in objecting to a project. To begin your legal research, you can look at textbooks. In law school, we were required to read textbooks for our legal research and writing courses. These are two examples. One is legal research and writing, the other is writing and analysis in the law. In these texts, you go over the rules of law, what is the law, determining the law from cases and statutes, how to cite to cases and statutes and other legal authority, primary sources, which are the binding authority that you want to use, so the courts will follow it. And then you have secondary sources, which are sources that help you find the primary authority. You will then develop legal research strategies. How are you going to find the law? Where are you going to look? And ultimately, you will want to prepare a writing. So hopefully there will be a hearing on this project that you are going to challenge, and you can prepare something in advance in writing based on your legal research, and also provide your position verbally in front of the people holding the hearing. Primary sources of the law include federal, state, and local ordinances. Federal and state includes constitutions, statutes, regulations, and cases. So for example, at the federal level, we have the US Constitution, and the first 10 amendments to the Constitution are our Bill of Rights, such as the freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion. We have statutes like the US Code. Then we have regulations like the Code of Federal Regulations, and we have federal and state court cases. You want this primary authority because it's precedent that you can use in the courts. Secondary sources such as Hornbooks and nutshells help you find the primary authority. Here are some examples such as administrative law, property, civil procedure, constitutional law. Now, let's say a developer is going to construct this 300-unit apartment building next to you, and the developer decides that he's going to use a 10-foot strip by 100 feet, and he's going to take your piece of property, and no one has notified you that they are going to take your piece of property. So in addition to the environmental issues that you may find and object to with this project, such as demolishing or destroying 100 trees, you may have some real property arguments, such as they're improperly taking your property and you're entitled to due process, such as notice and an opportunity to be heard. There are also treatises which are secondary sources. Some of them you can buy, others you may choose not to. The Endangered Species Act treatise here can be bought from about $25 to $50, or you can find this treatise on the California Environmental Quality Act, and the price for it will vary depending on the number of users and the intended use. There are also other sources that you can find online that are free, so search and you can find free sources in addition to these good resources. There are secondary sources in the law that you can find at law libraries. So for example, you have encyclopedias at both the federal and state levels. You have law reviews. Generally, these are articles by law students on certain topics, such as the Endangered Species Act or the destruction of trees. You also have these well-known treatises, such as Witkin, Summary of the Law, and Miller and Starr. Again, let's say you are objecting to this proposed development for 300 units next to you, and you want to find some general information on environmental laws such as CEQA. Well, you can start off with Witkin, but then there are also these real property and due process issues because they are going to take a strip of your land. If you look at Miller and Starr, you can find some information about your real property rights and due process when somebody wants to take your property or infringe on your property rights. You'll need to conduct research and strategy when you start to do your research. Where do you want to start in this vast web of law? It depends on what you have. You may have a citation that you found in a legal article. You can start there if you have a citation. Or maybe you have a code under CEQA, the Public Resources Code, and there are sometimes annotations. What these annotations do is they interpret the statute, and they are various types of citations or legal authority, such as cases, etc. Let's discuss some citations and legal hyperlinks. So here under the federal and the state of California, you find citations to the Constitution. So this is a citation to the U.S. Constitution, Article 3, Section 2, which discusses judicial review and judicial powers. Here you have the California Constitution, which discusses the courts of appeal and their divisions. Here is a citation to the U.S. Code, and it refers to sections 1531 to 1544, which is the Endangered Species Act. You have these two little symbols because you have more than one section. If you only had one section, let's say 1531, then you would only have one symbol. And again, this is an abbreviation for the word section. Here we are looking at the Code of Federal Regulations that refers to section 17.21. This section discusses endangered and threatened species and the conservation of them. On the state side, if you look at the California Public Resources Code, sections 21,000 to 1177, this is the California Environmental Quality Act, also known as CEQA. And here you have an example of the California Code of Regulations, Title 23, Section 497.2, that deals with water issues. In addition to the Constitution, statutes, codes, and regulations, you have cases. So here is a case called the Sierra Club versus Froca, and this is the citation to the case 534 Federal 2nd at page 1289. That's where it starts, but you are also citing to a specific page here that deals with the Endangered Species Act, and NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. The opinion was rendered in 1976. Here we have a state case, which is Mejia versus City of Los Angeles, where my neighbors and I sued the City of Los Angeles or opposed a project approved by the City of Los Angeles because it failed to comply with CEQA. The city failed to properly address biological resources and traffic issues. You have two different citations because this is a Blue Book citation and this is according to the California manual. You also have the Los Angeles Municipal Code at the local level, and this section is an example that incorporates an LA County section regarding health. If you were to go to the municipal code section online, you would be able to click on the LA County code section and it would take you to that code section, and that's what we refer to as a hyperlink. Also, for example, if you were reading the Sierra Club case online, it would cite to the US code for the Endangered Species Act, then you would be able to click on that and it would take you to the code section that you want to further examine. Now let's look at some of the law libraries that may be accessible to you. You can find law at a law library such as the LA County Law Library downtown, where you would have access to Westlaw and LexisNexis. These are computer databases that are available, but generally one has to pay for them. You can also find legal resources at the law schools. They each have their own policy as to what you can access there. There are pros and cons to going to law libraries. So for example, you won't need a computer because you have access to the books there. But in case you do need a computer, they also have the books. They also have computers available. It's easier to read the hard copies. It's free of charge. You can browse. If you need help, you can ask a reference librarian for help. And if your research is difficult, then you can also ask the librarian there for help as to your search. Some of the cons, you need to physically go there as opposed to being at home and working from your computer. And you will have to pay for printing copies, and that may be more expensive than actually printing at home from your computer. Also, you will have to pay for parking. So at some of these law libraries. So for example, if you go downtown, you will have to pay for parking. So it's in your interest to search for the least expensive parking. Now I have a question that asks about finding legal information on a global level. At the law library, they have international sources. So again, that's a good source. And you may be able to find some international articles or reporters or publications that can help you. I have actually done that in the past, and I have found helpful information that I have been able to use in court. And that was pretty much the only place I could find it. Now you can also use Google Scholar and other sources in the internet to find some global information. Again, Google Scholar does have some international sources. You can pay for some online libraries like Westlaw and Nexus. They are expensive. But they do have some advantages. You have more search options and hyperlinks and many more secondary sources. I earlier talked about the different types of legal authority, such as cases, federal regulations, and statutes. If you find a case and it cites to some federal regulations or a US statute, you can click on it, and that's what we refer to as a hyperlink. You click on it and it will take you to that other case you want to look at. you can take a quick look at it and see if it will help you. And maybe after you click on that case or statute or code, you will want to click on another in there until you finally find something that's really helpful to you and you will be able to use to oppose this 300-unit apartment next to you or this freeway that's going through the national forest. Some free sources are, again, Google Scholar that I briefly mentioned, and you will find lots of authority on there. There were other sites that were free, but they've decided to charge now. So Google Scholar is still a good source. Now the federal sites and the California sites also have free information such as the Constitution and Code and regulations. The free federal site can be governmentinfo.gov, and for California, it can be leginfo.legislature.ca. Conclusion. When you're going to oppose a project, you want to make sure that you take the time to do research. So, for example, if you find a code or you find a case, you can write a memo or a letter and say, this project has significant adverse impact because according to Public Resource Section 2170, this building violates the section because it fails to take the community into consideration. It fails to evaluate the extent of destroying the habitat for owls or hawks or eagles, or your due process is being violated because you didn't get notice of the hearing, you didn't get notice of the project, you didn't get notice that they were going to take part of your property to construct this apartment building, or you live on federal property that you lease and it's adjacent to the national forest and you haven't been notified, and you're going to be significantly and adversely impacted because this project is next to you. You will want to prepare, because the more prepared you are, the more bases you will have to oppose the project. Again, it's not sufficient to say this project has significant adverse impacts. You need to say it's going to violate, for example, the Endangered Species Act because this hawk is on the endangered species list, and we need to conserve the habitat for this hawk, and we need to conserve the hawks. Thank you for your time, and if there are any questions, I will address them.
Maria, I think we had a question about where to get free Lexis and Westlaw access.
Okay, so you can go to public libraries to access Lexis and Westlaw free. For example, one location is the Law Library downtown, which is a great resource. There are also other public libraries, like in Pasadena, there's a public library that has access to one or both Westlaw and or LexisNexis. And there's also a Compton library that has these resources. Those are free. Those are a few of the free resources.
Okay, and there was another question about, can we access Nexis Lexis online via the library app? I don't know the answer to that question myself. So it's conceivable that some libraries would provide that access to library members like online, but I just don't know. Do you know, Maria?
No, I access Westlaw or Lexis through their site, and I just log in and type in my ID and password.
Yeah.
So I don't
Okay.
know if they have an app.
Okay, well, thank you, Maria. That was very helpful.